Welcome to episode 280 of Sports Geek. On this week's podcast, I chat broadcast, storytelling and streaming with Optus Sports' Richard Bayliss.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is now using Discord more than Slack, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and I am using Discord more than Slack. Being in the gaming space, it is the messaging and community platform of gamers. As now someone who is in esports with my own esports team, Gravitas, I am playing around in different Discords and seeing it being used as an engagement platform, and think there is potential for it to be used in the world of sport. As always, you can find me on the internet. SportsGeekHQ.com is where all Sports Geek content podcasts live. You can contact me the old-fashioned way, Sean at SportsGeekHQ.com. Send me a tweet at Sean Callanan or hit up at SportsGeek on most social media channels. Before I get stuck into the podcast, because we're back, had a bit of a break, a little bit of a break during this COVID period. But I have been busy because if you have not noticed, we've been doing the Sports Biz Zoom calls. They have been powering on. We've recently just passed 600 people, 600 attendees that have joined in the Sports Biz Zoom calls. I was doing a little bit of what have we done previously, what have you missed? And here's the episodes, here's the call and the topics that we've done on the calls since my last podcast. We discussed membership and ticketing. We discussed esports and gaming. We had a whole conversation on broadcasts. We had a very popular conversation around the world of sponsorship and how we recoup some of the sponsorship that potentially has been lost with the current lockdowns. We've had a couple of good discussions around grassroots sports. We dove into the world of digital again. And then the last two are very special because they are now available if you want to watch them back. So July 28, 29, we discussed stadiums and venues. And it was a very different discussion from what it was 8 weeks prior. Now with some sports coming back, what does safety look like? How are fans reacting to coming back to stadiums? So those stadiums and venues calls, two of them from the Tuesday night and the Wednesday morning, are both there. And then this week, we discussed redesigning sport in a post-COVID world. So looking at things like resourcing, the way technology might change, and also how sports as a business model, what are some of the business models that need changing? Those are uploading right now. But that's me talking in real time. By the time you listen to this, they're uploaded. Where are they uploaded, you might ask? They are uploaded in the Sports Geek Patreon. So from July 28, we've been recording and making the Sports Biz Zoom calls available for Patreon subscribers. So if you cannot make one of the Sports Biz Zoom calls and you are interested, if you're a patron, you can access them. So thank you very much. I've had a lot of support and a lot of new subscribers. I'm going to spread some of these shout outs over the next couple of episodes. So I'm going to make sure I get to everyone. If I don't get to you, please give me a digital clip across the ear. Send me a note and say, hey, Sean, I'm a patron. I haven't heard my name yet. But I want to shout out to Paul Kelly from SportsLink Travel. Thank you very much. Steve Osborne, Ben Fox, Fiona Green, who generously came on the Sports Biz Zoom call and actually gave away free books. So thank you very much, Fiona. Appreciate your support of the Patreon campaign. And also Tim Mullally, formerly with the AFL and now running things for Tradable Bits here in Australia. Thank you very much for being a Patreon supporter. You can support personally, as a lot of those people have done, for as little as $4. We've now got a Sports Biz Zoom supporter. If you're a regular attendee to the Sports Biz Zoom, $10 a month, and you can say, I appreciate the effort being put in each week. Or you can be a startup supporter if you've got a startup and want to amplify that and let it be known that you're a supporter of both of Sports Geek, but also looking to get into the space. Or if you're a sports technology business, you can be a silver or gold supporter. Thank you very much to all that have become a supporter and all that have become a supporter after I've made this recording. I really do appreciate it. It does help me keep things ticking along, and pays for things like podcast editing and a few things. So it does definitely help. Now, I want to get stuck in to the podcast for today. In today's episode, I chat with Richard Bayliss. He's a sports journalist and presenter, and now director of sport at Optus Sports, which is a sports OTT service here in Australia, and a little bit more than that. So here is my chat with Richard Bayliss from Optus Sport. Very happy to welcome to the podcast Richard Bayliss from Optus Sport. He's the director of sport there. Welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Hey, Sean, great to be on.
First of all, I want to get stuck in. How did you break into the world of sport?
Well, I guess like the majority of us working in the sports industry, just through a supreme love of all things sport, from a variety of sports growing up, and having studied at university myself at Charles Sturt University in Bathurst, country in South Wales, and to be honest, I don't know what else I would have really done if it wasn't sports related.
What did you study?
It was sports media, double degree of communications, journalism, and human movement sports studies. So 4-year degree, which is just the right amount of time as well, I think, to enjoy university. A lot of my mates went 3 years, and it was probably not long enough, but I think 4 was maybe a little bit too long. So
coming out of university, did you have an idea where you wanted to go, and what was your first job?
Yeah, I was always broadcast. I've always been passionate about creating video. Even as a kid, I was always experimenting with videos around school, and certainly through university. I was sort of media officer of my rugby club as well, so would film everything and turned it into a bit more of I don't want to use the word professional, but sort of tried to up the stakes a little bit in terms of quality and try new things and experiment. So it was always about majoring in broadcast and finding a way into that through the commercials in Sydney. Primarily was the number one avenue, and it's amazing how many people I go out and meet that also went to the same university, and that was a really good kind of breeding ground in terms of knowledge, technical knowledge as well, and a lot of people have come through there. And I think one of the big things about any kind of communications role is that the ability to speak to other people it's so basic, but it's so important. You know, you can go to a university with a 98 UAI and get top marks and everything, but if you don't know how to speak to other human beings, what's the point of doing it? So that was a good uni for that.
And do you think, getting on the tools and having a passion for pulling out the camera and recording before, you hear a lot of people go, "Oh, I want to run the socials for a big team," or "I want to be a videographer," but they're not just living and breathing and doing it and starting to get those reps. Is that what you're looking for when you're looking for new producers, new content producers, people that are now filling, the roles at Optus Sport?
Yeah, 100%. And it's amazing, you come across people that might say, I can shoot, I can produce, I can host, I can write, but I can't edit. And if you can't edit, you kind of look at that person and go, well, you kind of really need to edit. Even if the job you're coming in is not for that, it's amazing. It just gives you that kind of full rounded view of how to create content, whether it's live, pre-recorded, whether it's serious or silly, just having all that knowledge. And from a professional sense now, I don't think too many places would hire people who have just one skill in broadcast. I think it's probably the case for a lot of industries now. You have to be multi-skilled and you have to be able to see things from a variety of perspectives. So absolutely, it's crucial.
So you've been in this space for a while. Before Optus, you're at Fox Sports in multiple roles, and then at Optus. So what's your remit of your role as director of sport at Optus?
Yeah, I came over to Optus as EP, executive producer, and I also host as well. So I host the Champions League coverage, Europa League. We do some shows, and even though that's probably less than 5% of my focus, there's still a real passion there for presenting, and that's where the adrenaline of the role really comes in as well. And even though I love seeing other people do well and I'd love to give people the opportunities, I still do enjoy doing that on occasion. So that's cool. But by and large, my role is to direct the editorial, the production. So, we have our content strategies, our editorial playbooks, and we do have a very editorial driven approach at Optus Sport as well. I mean, primarily we are a streaming service, but we have added layers on top of that in terms of our own production, our own editorial, because that forms, not only the quality that people see out there, but also the content marketing layer of what we do too. So it's kind of just directing that every day. And we've added a lot of people over the last 4 years that, are really good at what they do. And we're really proud of what they've added, in terms of things like editorial, production now, new ideas, marketing, social media, all of it. So it's about, putting that all together, making sure we're all heading in the right direction and coming up with new stuff as much as we can.
So how has that changed, like from your early days when you're at a broadcaster and it was what was inside the screen and what was being shown on the big screen as a broadcaster, and now you've got all these extra layers of, well, we've got to produce that show, but then what is it going to look like on social that draws the people in, whether they're already a subscriber, or putting it out on social that draws them in and makes them a subscriber? How much are you a broadcaster / marketer now?
I think you have to have an awareness of every single point of the process. I think to go back to when I began in broadcasting, social media was kind of on the horizon. It was sort of starting, and I actually happened to be working at Fox Sports News when we first opened a Twitter account, for example, and it was almost not an afterthought, but it was like a tacked on part of broadcasting at that stage, which makes sense because it was new. Yep. Whereas I think by the time Optus Sports started, it was not only was it entrenched in broadcasting, but it was also crucial. It's very much central to what you do because it's about, entertaining, it's about giving people information, but it's also crucial to your marketing. It's old school content marketing. We choose to do it in a very editorial way, but there are promotional ways you can go about it as well. And we view each social media platform in itself, and we're across 5 of them, as having their own social strategy. You can't apply the same principles of YouTube to Instagram, from Instagram to Twitter and to Facebook. You have to treat them all as not only their own social media platform, but I think their own platform in itself. And even though someone doesn't pay $15 a month to sign up to our Twitter account, you need to give them a really good essence of what your brand and your product is. And I think it's just so much closer to the start of the process these days in terms of how you create content and how you pitch your brand than it would have been, 5, 8, 10 years ago for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So can't have a chat in 2020 without talking about what 2020 has delivered so far. What's it like being a director of sport when sport stops?
Yeah, you ask yourself a lot of questions, the meaning of life and your purpose and all those types of things. It was such a blur, that little period, wasn't it? And I say was in some sort of past tense, like we're through it, but I guess we aren't yet either. I guess we saw it coming in a sense in that, for a couple of weeks before there was lockdown in Sydney, we thought, okay, let's move everything to remote and making sure that if all of a sudden someone clicks their fingers and no one can leave their houses, we can still create content. But I guess the key point is that the sport needs to keep going. And for I think a lot of the Australian sports, it was certainly very challenging. I guess one advantage we have, and also one disadvantage in a sense too, is that our sport is all overseas. So, English Premier League, Champions League, Europa League, J-League, the Women's Super League, all of it is overseas. So we're at the whim of the healthcare situation in the UK or in Europe. And the UK, as we know, is still a bit of a mess. So, for the Premier League to shut down, then we had to think, right, how do we get through this period? How can we actually operate day to day? And how can we provide a product to our subscribers that is worth hanging around for? And that was the big challenge for all pay TV operators.
So what was that meeting like? That meetings, those first couple of meetings when it was like everything stopped and you were like, well, hang on, my whiteboard has all of this content that were games and shows talking about the games that are happening. Did you really pretty much just have, well, hang on, that whiteboard is now empty. We've got to fill the next 24 hours. What were those first couple of days when, effectively that the hammer did drop and a lot of the leagues started stopping? What did you start looking? Because it was the same in the sports side. There was a little bit of panic, but then it was like there was a few different ideas that sort of started to come through to produce some content. What was those first couple of meetings like to go, how are we filling the next 24 to 48 hours when nothing is there for that weekend?
Yeah, I think number one, our first priority was to be able to ensure that we could edit and create content off-site so that we could remote into the computers within the production environment for a start. So whilst matches were still happening, off feeds, editors could still create mini matches and highlights. We do all that ourselves. So rather than just, dragging and dropping from some sort of service, we had to actually make that stuff from scratch when matches were still happening. So that was the primary thing to be able to tick off. And we've got some really good projects-based guys and innovative people within the team that were able to ensure we could do that from a technology standpoint. Making sure everyone was safe at home for a start. And then from there, once the games were stopping, it was then more tricky because you're looking at, obviously you've got a workforce we're a combination of full-time contract freelancers as well. So when you don't have the sport there, you're not giving people the assurance or the certainty of work. So, we went to create a lot more content. We moved to an archive-based content strategy initially where we dug back into the archives on Champions League and Premier League in a way that we otherwise maybe wouldn't have had time to. Yep. So we came up with new programming ideas across linear, social and digital, whereby we could put out new ideas with old content, which I know a lot of people did as well. And we created remote studios. We had one in my house, John Aloisi, Michael Bridges and Mark Schwarzer, who's in London. So we do nightly trivia and we do other content records and podcasts and flashbacks and stuff using that setup. So we kind of scrambled once sports stopped, but all the while just praying for it to come back because it's clearly the core of what we do. And that's the reason subscribers will hang around. We made it free, the Optisport product, for a few months, but we're under no illusions that they hang around because of the sport, and everything else we create on top is nice. And it hopefully adds to great coverage, but we just needed the football to come back.
The other thing that did happen in that time, there was a lot of discussions between rights holders and broadcasters around what are they getting back, when are they going to get back the sport that they'd paid for, what's it going to look like. Were you part of those discussions to try to say, well, hang on, we've paid for this. When are we getting it? I understand there's a pandemic. Like, were you in some of those discussions?
Some of those discussions are certainly internally. We discuss those things a lot, but I let other guys sort of take care of the actual rights discussion. So, sometimes it's good to be at arm's length when it's in that type of situation. But we've got a great relationship with the Premier League, for example. I mean, I think they really, without wanting to pump ourselves up, I think they really appreciate the way we've taken our coverage the last couple of years. And we're, in a sense, a bit of an experiment test bed for how they go about broadcasting partnerships or rights partnerships in the future. So we've got a really good relationship with them. And it was just about having an open dialogue, I think. And, when you're the Premier League, for example, and you've got 200 plus international broadcasters to look after, I don't envy that situation for them. When the Premier League, the biggest league in the world, stops for 3 months, that's a huge commercial, financial headache to overcome. So, whilst we're a key partner for them, I hope to say, that by the same token, they had plenty of people to worry about, not just us. Yeah.
And then the other part was, we were also, like, as sports were starting to come back and, there were people, I think it was Bulgaria was one of the soccer nations.
Belarus, yeah.
Belarus was still playing, and it was like everyone wanting to tune in. Were you also like scouring the world for, is there anywhere that's playing football that we can get on the channel and feed the football starved fans?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, absolutely. We announced on April 1st that we had marble racing, but no one seemed to take that particularly seriously. But then, the Belarusian Premier League, I had a lot of people message me and say, surely you've got to get the Belarusian Premier League. We want to watch live football. And even though we did look at it and spoke about it, I think the irony there is that I don't think anyone would have woken up at 2 or 3 a.m. They would have maybe liked to watch the mini matches or the highlights the next day. But then, aren't you just best having the good stuff, the archive of the Premier League? So we made the decision that probably wasn't the way to go, but that is how we came about getting the rights to the K-League in Korea, because, they were almost the first back after they'd stopped because South Korea handled the pandemic really well. So they came back, and that was an opportunity we jumped on for those exact reasons you say, Sean, knowing that people love live football and there was that gap there, and it was before the Australian leagues came back as well. So, with a few really good Aussies playing in the K-League and the time zone being so great, we thought, this is the perfect scenario bringing it in.
As a broadcaster, and seeing both the adaptability and the nimbleness of both your teams and also teams around the world and what people are wanting to consume and willing to consume, was there any wins of COVID to go, for a little while there, archive footage and watching replays and watching back replays, everyone's going, oh, the replays are back and this is how we can do it. But it sort of got stale. But but potentially it does say, oh, that is a format that we can roll out at any time. That the rewatching of a big Socceroos game and having all the players involved and getting all the conversation. Do you think some of those things you might still do post-COVID?
Yeah, very much so. I think we've learned a lot about the actual, let's call it the back-end production, the things that maybe viewers don't see as much, the how as opposed to the what. I mean, I think that in terms of broadcast infrastructure, there's been a set way of doing things for a number of years. So in this period, a lot of broadcasters have had to think about how to do things not only remotely but super efficiently, and with new technologies and software partners that cut out a few of the middlemen, if you like, and semi-automate the process of making content. So, we experimented with things like trivia, for example. Doing that completely remotely. I mean, that was switched and produced from a guy in his bedroom wearing his track pants, and we're filming it in our own home little studios. That's a really simple execution, but it's a couple of steps up from Zoom and Skype, etc. So you meet halfway between that and a full-blown studio broadcast, and you've got something that is much more efficient, and ultimately I think will benefit the viewer because people on screen will be much more accessible, but also broadcasters can maybe then spend time, resource, and effort on the bigger things as well. In addition to that, so there'll be more content.
Do you think some of those efficiencies will stay? Like, there's a conversation of flying all the big talent and setting up big sets at every single stadium every time there's a match. When over the last 4 or 5 months, every game's been called off the TV and the talent's been in studio. So there's been this saving of costs. Do you think some of those efficiencies will stay?
I think so. I think a lot of the ones that viewers can't necessarily see. I mean, we're seeing a lot of broadcasters, Channel 4, I should say, in the UK, for example, are commentating the Formula One at the moment off tube.
Yep.
Now, off-tube commentary is not something that's new. I mean, that's been around for a long period of time, but traditionally people have looked at it and thought, well, that's just a broadcaster not really willing to invest in being there.
Yep.
But if you think about commentary in its essence, it probably doesn't need people to be there. I mean, there are other roles on site that are more important. I mean, obviously, cameramen, reporters, potentially not even things like, graphics producers, none of that stuff really needs to be on site in essence in terms of what the viewer sees. So I think there'll be a pullback of unnecessary roles, if you like, on site. And maybe then you just focus on the people that need to be there, your sideline reporters and people that are on camera potentially, your floor managers and cameras. So I think there will absolutely be a move to that. And even we've done that. I mean, we've brought Simon Hill in to commentate the Champions League. Traditionally we would have always said, how do we get Simon to the Champions League matches? But due to the fact that he can't travel at the moment and the fact that we're able to build a facility on site, we're going to have him call that off tube, which I don't think is an issue. Maybe down the track we'll look at having him on site, but I think we're using the current situation to benefit our viewers.
Definitely. Part of what you're doing at Optus Sport is obviously live sport and producing live sport, but also looking at the documentary space. And again, it's another one of those ones that has received a lot of viewership. I don't think I haven't spoken to anyone in sport that didn't watch The Last Dance. And again, it's saying, documentaries are a thing that more broadcasters are looking at. And it's starting to become even a category in the world of sport where sports are, selling their broadcast rights, seeing different players in the space. How important is the documentary piece for Optus Sport?
Yeah, massive. I mean, you hit the nail on the head in that, a lot of not only broadcasters, but, Cricket Australia, for instance, with the test, that's them thinking, how do we bring people inside the bubble? I mean, The Last Dance was phenomenal, and we've seen so many miniseries on Netflix pop up and Amazon, and there'll only be more and more. Some of them are propaganda pieces, but most of them are really entertaining because it's just a really good insight. For us, it's massive because, it's like I was talking before, that layer around your core product, the storytelling. I mean, storytelling is so crucial to what we want to do or how we want to achieve what we want to achieve, because people just love stories. I mean, you might have your daily podcasts and your daily articles about this player with a hamstring injury and this player not being picked and this person out of form. But ultimately, it's the storytelling around the matches that actually gives, weight to why these competitions are so important. The history around sport, the traditions and the characters. That's what sells sport at the end of the day. So for us, it's crucial. We've gone into the space of doing a lot more in Australia as well. We've got a series at the moment, Football Belongs. We've done series 1 of 2, and we've got a documentary coming next year as we count down to the Euros. That was a way to tell the stories in Australian football that otherwise aren't really being told, and also, connect with the European-based communities that, in essence, will love to watch the Euros, but maybe haven't had the connection before or for a little while in Australian football. So that's one example of how we're looking to do it, and hopefully we'll have a few more on the way as well.
I mean, that's the thing of the evergreen nature and the rewatchability of documentaries. Like they're far higher. As much as a classic game, you can go back and watch it. Rewatching a documentary is far more rewatchable. And then when you are looking for something to watch, it's always going to be there. So that's why you are seeing Cricket Australia and all the different players saying, "Hey, how do we get into this space?" Obviously, you're a big football fan, being an Optus, and a Leeds United fan. What's the last couple of weeks been like as a Leeds United fan?
Drunk, hungover, headaches. No, it's been unreal. The last couple of years, the last 16 years actually, have been awful for the most part. And last year, I was about to say this time last year, but I don't know what the calendar's doing at the moment.
Yeah.
The end of last season, I flew over to England just to watch their last couple of games because it looked like they were on their way to the Premier League, and they absolutely threw it away and it unfolded in front of my eyes. So that was nice. So to see them from a distance now in this really weird, eerie kind of scenario when, there are no fans in the stadium, and that's one, and Liverpool fans winning the title, another great example of those things. They only really matter because there are crowds. They only really matter because there are fans. The context comes from the hurt and the enjoyment that people have had over the many years following them. So there would have been, the crowd invasion on the pitch at Ellen Road, and there would have been parades and all that type of stuff. And that letting out of emotion is why you invest so heavily into it. So to miss out on that was a shame. But having said that, watching it unfold from the other side of the world was also enjoyable. Cracked a beer at, I think it was about 6 a.m., which, please, no judgment.
You're more than allowed to. But I guess the other part of it is like, I guess the society we now live in, like all of those, the opportunity to tell that story of this, socially distanced victory is definitely there, because there'll be all of these social media snippets and videos of people cheering. And a friend of mine was pretty much on a 24-hour Twitter rant, just celebrating the whole time. It's like, what does that look like if you, get into that documentary piece and weave into, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to them? There's so much there, but it is just the initial moment of, the trophy being lifted and there's confetti, and then you look around, there's no one there. That's a tough one for, I guess, probably I feel more for the players, but also the bleeding heart fans that would be in the stands if they could be.
Well, I think, one of the big questions, and a lot of people have said to me, Leeds will get relegated straight away back down again, which wouldn't be great. But I almost think, getting there and getting over that massive hurdle is what it's all about. But it has made me think that, well, if there's no travel for another 12 months plus, and they do end up spending only 1 year in the Premier League, then people like me and all supporters around the world that can't travel to see them will be massively let down. Sport's nothing without the fans. And, as a broadcaster, we'll admit it freely. I mean, the Premier League right now and the Champions League right now, it's not what it should be. There's no doubt about that. And even though there are still great storylines and amazing athletes, the sooner we can get people back, yelling and screaming their heart out inside stadiums, the better for everybody.
Yeah, as you do raise a good point on the fans. There has been broadcasters trying to make it sound like and almost trick the brain, whether it be the audio work that's being done to make it sound like there's crowds there. I think Fox Sports News in the baseball have put in digital fans, that sort of like a straight out of Madden game. What's your take on it, both as a football fan but also as a broadcaster? How important is it to try to get, I guess, some of that fan ambience into the broadcast?
I think it is really important for a TV product because, as you say, it does trick the brain and it doesn't take too long. You think about some sports where it doesn't work as well. I think AFL is an example where it's such a big, expansive ground and there might be 100,000 empty seats at the MCG. Whereas for something like football or rugby league, where it's shot tighter, and the TV product traditionally is better than, on balance, say, than AFL, which might be obviously a personal.
But it's more of an input. Like AFL is that you watch it live if you're there and it's a better game. I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's worked really well for some sports like NRL, and for football, different competitions have done it in different ways. We've had the option with the Premier League to turn crowd noise on or off. And it's great hearing players and managers, yelling to each other and that ambient sound. It sounds like watching a game down at the park, which kind of has that really kind of cool semi-amateur feel to it. But at the end of the day, I think having crowd noise is important because the TV product is it at the moment. People don't have the option of going to the stadium. And for the Champions League, we've decided we'll only have the crowd audio. And again, we just think that on balance, and the stats back it up, that most people will choose to pick the crowd audio, even if they know that it's somewhat fake or it's come from EA Sports. I think they know that it's the closest to the real thing.
Yeah. I mean, it has been interesting seeing what the NBA has been doing with its bubble and its Microsoft Teams sort of screens around. And then even then with, I was watching League Pass this morning, you can just flick and just say, I just want to hear court squeaks and that's all. I'm not hearing any commentary at all. But again, is that the experience you want? There's a little bit of novelty to it, because I do want to go back to listen to Doris Burke or listen to the commentators and getting that piece. But yeah, it is funny when you hear broadcasters say, "Oh, the crowd's getting excited," and it's an audio one. But it is one for the. I did want to, before we sort of wrap things up, I did want to talk about a little bit about, I guess, strategy-wise back on the being a broadcaster in the social space, like. Optus Sport does want to get involved and sort of be part of the conversation. Like I've worked with different brands and sports media brands that sort of pretty just tread the fine line of, here's our highlight, this is the next show coming out. And it's hard to get some, I guess, color and banter in those type of social accounts. How do you guys manage it, and why have you gone down a path of sort of being a bit more involved with the fans?
I think it all stems from where we want it to be as a brand. So, a lot of traditional broadcasters might, because it's the way they've always done it, they are conveying things to the audience, whereas we are the audience. We want to enjoy it with the audience. So if we're watching a Champions League final, we are watching it with the fans. So there's no point us, trying to tell people how they should feel when it comes to sport. So we've taken a decision where we'll experience it with them and we'll enjoy it too. And, football fans by nature, I think a lot of sports fans in nature are, they love banter. They love, obviously extremely passionate, and that's what we want to be. I think we try to pick our moments. We have punked our audience on a few occasions, and we know that it's just baiting people and we're going to cop some stick for it. But that's what football fans do by and large. So, it was our way, I think, of buying. Well, buying's probably the wrong word, but, really kind of getting that authenticity to show that, we're not going to be a broadcaster and tell you to read our articles or watch our shows. We're going to prove that we are football fans. And that's, social media producers have worked in football at NPL level. They've played the game. They are the most passionate football fans I know. So when we're sitting around throwing ideas to each other and bouncing stupidity off each other, one idea out of 5 or 6 might stick, and we decide, hey, let's just do it. We're a young brand, and we don't have people, like, I very rarely stick my head in and say, don't do that. And we don't have anybody saying, tread a fine line. We do like to push the boundaries where we can, and occasionally we'll get it slightly wrong and our fans will be telling us off about it. But hopefully the next day we make it up to them in another way. So that's our approach.
And is that pretty much, because that's a tough balance, like, of creating that culture? Because we've seen some, NBA teams that have done it well, and some of the Premier League teams that have done it well and played in that sort of on the edge. But like having those checks and balances of like how far is that line, right? Because in the end, you are still a big corporate brand, and someone will come and say, "Oh, we don't want that." Like, how do you manage that? How do you give your team enough rope and a culture to go, we're going to have a go, and there is. Not too many checks and balances, but everyone's still not sending out that tweet that costs everyone, a big meeting in a boardroom.
Yeah, and I think a lot of credit has to go to the wider Optus as well, because, when they started Optus Sport, they didn't necessarily know what the brand was going to be. That was, I guess, our job in coming in to sort of steer it in a direction. And there have been some moments where they've kind of looked at what we're doing and wondered what on earth we are doing, but they've put full faith in us, I think, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. And we do have a lot of checks and balances. Behind the scenes, there are the boring stuff as well. The playbooks, the editorial guidelines, and I think the social media guys probably cop the wrath of me asking silly questions more than anyone else, because it's so visual, isn't it? And it's just so front of house. I mean, you think about if a Facebook page has 300,000 people watching it or following it, a large percentage aren't your actual product's audience. They might not be subscribers. So that is their experience with Optus Sport. So you can't afford to get it even slightly wrong if you can avoid it. So we have had moments where we've pushed the boundaries too much, and I've got phone calls where it's like, hey, what are you guys, what on earth is this? And I'm like, yeah, okay, fair point. Maybe that was a bit far, but I think the only way you know where the boundaries are is by occasionally stepping over them. So hopefully it doesn't happen too much and we can continue to be slightly different, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to be.
And it becomes a way for a fan or a consumer or a potential consumer going, oh, they're doing a good thing. I like this. Oh, I will go and check it out. So it is part of the overall strategy to say, come on in, it's fine, sit down, let's watch some football.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's content marketing in its purest form, isn't it? And, even in us we added written articles about 14, 15 months ago. And that's another way of saying to people, hey, come and read these articles for free, come and get involved in the discussion. And then if you want to take it a step further and you want to subscribe, well then cool. That's up to you. Hopefully you like what we do, and that's the logical next step.
Terrific. Well, before we wrap things up, I want to go to the Sports Geek closing five. I'm here with Richard Bayliss from Optus Sport. You can send him a tweet, RS Bayliss, 2 S's, if I've got that correct. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Well, I think it was the first. I'm not totally sure. My memory's not fantastic.
It's all right. No one can Google it, so we're good.
That's true. When I was 8, I went to the 1994 Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide, which, the last two in Adelaide, 94 and 95. Well, 95, I think, still holds the record for the biggest single-day attendance in an Australian sporting event. I think it had 205,000 people there. So the 94, the year before, was also massive. As an 8-year-old as well, it kind of gave me everything that I think all sports should give you, which is a sensory experience, which Formula One absolutely is. I mentioned NBA before. I think that's another great example of a sport that is a sensory experience. So too Premier League. And as an 8-year-old kid hearing V12 Ferraris with, doing this with your ears, pushing it in. So, the earbuds weren't enough. It was really formative, I would say, in knowing that I wanted to have something to do with sport down the track.
Terrific. Well, in your role at Optus, and you've already gone to many sports events, probably unfortunately to a lot of media rooms. But do you have a favourite? Do you have a favourite food at a sports event? Do you have a go-to food or a favourite food memory?
Oh, I've definitely got a favourite food memory. That was at Yankee Stadium. I was just on holiday. I went to the US and went to my first ever MLB game at Yankee Stadium. And I reckon, the food options at American sports are phenomenal. MetLife is exactly the same. But, it was actually a really entertaining game at the time too. But I remember just thinking, I'm going to try one of everything in this stadium. And I might have been ill for the next couple of days, but it was so worth it because
Did you knock over the nachos in the hat? That's always
nachos, hot dog, wings, all the traditional ones. And then I had a guy, they were playing against Arizona. I was lining up and this guy came up and he sensed that I was an outsider and he just sort of tapped me on the shoulder and he went, the food's way better in Arizona. And I was like, all right, mate, no worries. I'll find that out one day.
Terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning?
I should say Optus Sport, but it probably isn't. BBC Sport actually is usually the first I go to, given that the football season goes for 12 months long, and to get that first editorial hit of what's happening, some results as well. I follow some weird and wacky leagues too, so I like to have an idea of what's happening, and I've always found the BBC guys are super reliable.
Terrific. Is there someone that you follow, whether it's an author or someone on Twitter or someone personally that the podcast listeners should check out and follow?
I think one organisation that have been really impressive in the last 12 months is The Athletic.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of them. I've been trying to get a lot of mates onto reading articles on there because I like how they pitch their articles. You know, they're not trying to break news. They're actually, once the news cycle happens and the dust settles, that's where they come in with that depth. You know, they've got reporters and journalists with every team. You know, their coverage of not only football, but US sports in particular is super strong and really interesting, you know, long form reads. So I'd encourage, if you have a favourite club or a team.
And they're pushing hard, and they're pushing more into Europe and into football, haven't they, in the last 12 months, pushing hard into that space and getting some quality people behind it. Yeah,
and they have sort of a journalist to each football club, and I know they do the same in the US. So you follow that person. If you've got the team, you follow that journalist, and they bring you sort of inside scoops, and in a way that shows that, you know, breaking news isn't the only currency when it comes to news, I guess. You know, there's that layer of depth, and that's kind of what we've modelled our editorial, our written editorial model onto. I think it's really interesting to see how it plays out in the next couple of years.
It's a fascinating, business media model, that's really disrupting. You know, with a lot of online media, you know, advertiser-driven, struggling. It's another way of saying, well, this is where quality lands, and people are willing to pay for it, which is good. The last question is, what social media platform is your MVP? So this is Kevin Durant style. You can't pick three, but I do give you two choices. You can say from an Optus point of view, what social media platform is working best, and then what's your personal go-to MVP platform? It's for both. I think it's going to be out of Instagram or YouTube. I guess. Okay. You think YouTube's counted, Sean? I'm happy to call YouTube a platform because it's just like there's so much content on it, and it's such, you know, so many people are consuming it. If we keep excluding it from the platforms, it's a bit unfair. So yeah, that's fair. Yeah. That's fair enough. I think for us, we kind of see it somewhat in between because we try to, you know, to your point before around broadcasters in this age, trying to offer more. You know, we do live games over YouTube and Facebook when we can, whether it be from the K-League or old classics, because they are video-driven social platforms. But YouTube, obviously, it knows the viewer so well. And we've had some really good wins on there too, you know, with our highlights and also trying to build the different identity almost on there. But from a more simple, maybe my personal perspective, I really like Instagram because whilst I talk about the depth of The Athletic and how editorial depth is great, sometimes visuals are just the most important thing. And, you know, things like stories in terms of building a brand and showing what you're about. You know, I've got some great designers in our team and we just love letting them loose, saying, go for it. Like, it's a visual medium, just have as much fun as you want and see what you can do. So I think Instagram is somewhat underrated. And, you know, that has been a common answer of like, it's the one, Instagram stories is the one that just keeps growing and growing and getting more engagement. And I guess the innovation and the storytelling that's still evolving on like how people are using it. There's a lot of options in that space. And then the YouTube stuff, like, the more it gets embedded into smart TVs and you just click the button and there it is. And then it starts recommending stuff like there's more and more people getting on it for that, but that's not even counting the whole demographic that it's their first place to go get video. Like everyone under 24, that's their remote control, the YouTube, you know, app. Well, I mean, you know, when you and I grew up, you know, the TV guide would have been fairly prevalent, but for anyone under the age of maybe even 15, 16 now, they wouldn't know what a TV guide is. And I also think a lot of people probably don't ever watch linear or traditional TV, and more are going to YouTube as that number one app. That'll tell them what to watch, and that takes all the fuss out of it. Yeah, which is why it makes it a social media network. You put your content there and then it's like, I want to dive in further. And it sends people there. So it becomes a big part of content marketing. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast. What's the best place for people to find you on the internet if they wanted to reach out and say hello? Probably Twitter, I would say, as said, at RS Bayliss. Always really interested to hear from people as what they do and don't like about what we do. I mean, feel free to have a personal dig at me too. That's always fun to read that sort of stuff. There have been periods where I've copped more than others, but it's always great for us to hear what people like. And we actually do try, I know it's a lot of people probably say it, but we do actually try to take a lot on from what our viewers and followers think, particularly those that are invested in the game and they want to see their ideal coverage in Australia. We do take a lot of that feedback on because, like I said before, we
we are football fans too, so we try to be as attuned to that as possible.
Notoriously known for international listeners. Soccer Twitter in Australia is a strong voice.
Yeah.
That is a dangerous place to play, if I could say, if you're listening, because it's a very noisy group, but a very passionate group. So there's obviously a lot to mine in there, in taking that feedback, I can imagine.
Sometimes I feel like you can think that soccer Twitter is the whole iceberg as opposed to just the tip. But, they are super passionate. And, I will admit freely to you, maybe for the first time in public, Sean, that we have on occasion with certain social posts asked, well, what will this do for soccer Twitter? When you're trying to do a bit of social fishing, because they're just passionate, and you need people like that. And that's the best thing about it.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you very much for coming to the podcast. All the best. May the rest of your 2020 be better than the first half of 2020. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Cheers, Sean. Really appreciate your time. And, love what you're doing with the pod. And hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Cheers.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Richard Bayliss. Follow him on Twitter, RD Bayliss, BAYLISS, or connect with him on LinkedIn. As he said there, he would love some feedback on what Octopus Sport are doing, good, bad, or otherwise. Also, a shout out and a thanks to Dan Lacaze for setting up that interview. Before I wrap up, one of the things that I have been doing during this lockdown period, and I have been lucky enough to do it with some of the people who have been coming to the Sports Biz Zoom calls, is these Pick My Brain sessions, which can be anything. They're effectively a 2-hour block for you to dive in on a particular topic, or train your team, or dive in on a specific issue you're looking at, or analyse what you're doing in the Facebook ad space, or brainstorm what your product is and what you're trying to do. It is pretty freeform, but it's bespoke. Effectively, it's getting me come to your team meeting or your session via Zoom. 2 hours. I've done them one-on-one. I've done them with a team. Sometimes it's part keynote, part brainstorm, part workshop. We found out that they're very effective in, I guess, recharging the team, getting them ready, especially sort of in this period, in disconnection and being stuck at home and trying to coordinate a team working from home. It's a way to sort of say, hey, let's bring you all together and brainstorm some ideas for the next 4-6 weeks or for the rest of the season. So simply go to sportsgeekhq.com to look at the links there to book a Pick My Brain session, but you can always just go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Book in a time, have a chat, ask me what type of session you might want to look at. I'm happy to have a chat about that. One of the new segments I did add to the podcast recently was Do This Today. One tactic that you can implement today that will improve your life. This one is going to be one that I am trying to implement on a regular basis, on a daily basis. I actually have a Lametric, which is a little Internet of Things device that's connected to the internet and shows messages, gives me updates on my Twitter following and tweets coming in and the weather. And it also can have a static message that comes up every as it cycles through. And one of mine is make the phone call, which is don't get stuck in your own head, don't get stuck alone in your office. Make the phone call, whether that phone call is to a colleague or a friend, or someone you've worked with, or someone or a provider that you've worked with. Make the phone call. Sometimes it's good to reach out and just have a chat, and you never know what comes from those conversations. So it's something I'm trying to do to stay connected. So yeah, make the phone call, and if that phone call comes to me, much appreciated. So yeah, likewise. And if you need someone to talk to, please reach out. So make the phone call. One of the last things before, if you are listening to this in the first couple of days after it comes out, and you are in Australia, I will actually be on a panel for IAB Australia. They're hosting a series of webinars, as a lot of people are. And next Thursday, the 13th of August, I will be joining the panel to discuss the world of esports and gaming. The title of the panel is More Than a Game, the Explosion of the Esports Industry. And it'll be good to have a discussion there. We're also going to have Ricky from Twitch and a few other people discussing the world of esports and gaming. It has been a conversation piece over the past 8 weeks. The esports must be blowing up. And so the answer is yes. The conversations have accelerated. More people are talking about it. The viewership is up. And so I think it has accelerated the conversation for brands to enter the space. There's still work to do, but it's very promising. So if you want to turn up and come along to that, you are more than welcome. The links to that will be in the show notes, or you can go to IAB Australia and you should be able to find the links. So that's it from me. All the key links of what you can do are on Sports Geek HQ. You can go there and find out about the 2-hour Pick My Brain sessions. If you're a B2B provider and you want to reach the Sports Geek audience, please go there and click Let's Collaborate to Help Sports, because that's the Sports Geek Amplify series. That's me developing a content series for sports technology providers into the world of sports. I want to build a series where I help interrogate those different products so it makes it easier for you as a listener to know what products you should be thinking about as you're coming out of this COVID period. So if you think your product, or you think you're using a product that you think is a good fit, please reach out. Let me know. Also, if you are displaced or out of work, please go to the site, click the Connect Now button, and sign up as a sports business rockstar. I'm looking for and trying to facilitate getting people to their next place, but also looking at developing what I'm calling the Sports Geek Avengers Project, bringing together the best but displaced rock stars and seeing what exciting new offers we can bring to the world of sport. So again, like my do this today offer, making that phone call. So it's really around having those conversations to see and discuss, what we can offer to the world of sport. And lastly, if you are listening to this podcast, much appreciated, but I would love to see you on the Sports Biz Zoom calls, whether it is on the Tuesday night Australian time, or that's around lunchtime in Europe and South Africa, or Wednesday mornings, which works as Tuesday evenings to my friends in the US. It's been great to stay connected with everyone in the industry via the Zoom calls. Please join us. The next couple are going to be really exciting. This week, if you're listening to it, connecting sponsors, fans via CRM. And again, remember, if you missed the episode, if you missed the call, as a patron, you can watch the replay. Next week's going to be ticketing in 2021. How many chicks can we get on the seats? How can we plan for that? It's going to be really tough. And then we're going to look at a few different topics: millennials and sports, how we can better connect with millennials, what does sports need to do as a product to better connect, developing new fan bases, what that means for different people, what new fan bases are you going to tackle? Is it a new global fan base? Is it a new demographic fan base? Is it a new age group fan base? Is it gender-based? Is it community-based? And then September 8-9, we're really going to look a little bit further in the future and say, what's sport going to look like in 2030, 10 years' time? It seems a long way away when you're in the middle of a pandemic, but I think we'll have fun with that one. As always, my goal for 2020 has not changed. I want to execute big things, and so I want to work on big problems. So let's set up that phone call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Click a time, and until next episode, I really appreciate you listening. My name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Got a question for Sean? Send it in for our Sports Geek Q&A series. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/questions. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.